Hi friends and family. Today in this video I want to talk a little bit about David and Goliath and David's role as a shepherd. And also, to be clear, without going too much into the actual scripture, because as I've said in other videos and as I'll say again, I'm not an expert on the Bible. I have a general idea of the story. So I try to talk about the specific obvious stuff that I know and leave the rest to the scholars to correct me on later, if that makes sense. But what I'm also trying to do is provide a platform in which I can discuss the Bible in broad terms in a really positive, I hope, a really positive way and an honest way, and hope that people see some kind of easy to grasp truth. And again, if you're an atheist or a pagan, and you're a debater and you're a scholar and you want to fight me on this stuff, you'll probably win. I'm not looking to get into a huge debate with anybody. I'm trying to tell a story, more or less. So anyways, if you've a past video I made called Thorns, I was talking about some service I've done at my church outside, cutting up and moving a kiabe tree, which is a big tree that has a lot of thorns on it, and how that in some ways felt reminiscent of the curse that we have as humans to work the land, even though it's filled with thorns. Well, I'm not going to talk about that in this video. I feel like I covered that well enough. What I want to talk about in this video is this other thing that happened. I kept calling the tree Goliath in my head. It felt just like this monster. It was this huge thing. It was full of thorns, like I've said. And it was kind of looming over this preschool fence and had fallen down. It was like kind of threatening the preschool fence in a way. And I largely took care of that in the first day that I was there. And I moved it all, and then it was just a mess to clean up. But I kept calling it Goliath. Made me feel special. And it was kind of fun. Not that I was thinking of myself as David, mind you. It was just a fun little analogy. But anyways, I had a moment, though, or a few moments, I kept passing this stone on the ground, and it was a nice, oblong, smooth, kind of looking different than all the other stones on the ground. There's a lot of lava rock in Hawaii. It's very rough and porous, but this was a nice, dark, smooth stone, what you'd expect to see maybe on a cobblestone beach or in a riverbed that's very eroded. And I kept thinking of the sling stone, David's sling, and that one stone that he killed Goliath with. And it just got me thinking about David and that standoff, that mighty standoff where God was filling David with the Spirit, and God delivered David victory over this unbeatable foe. And thinking about kind of walking back and forth back to Goliath and picking up Goliath's thorny branches in my arms and walking past the stone and then throwing the branches and walking past the stone again. And I was thinking about it over and over again. And it got me on this little funny train of thought of what it was like for David to kill Goliath versus what it was like for me in that moment to slay Goliath, which was this thorny tree. And the big difference there was David, in one fell stroke, with God's divine intervention, ended Goliath and ended it. And Goliath was dead forever. And yet I was going piece by piece, bit by bit, thorn by thorn, branch by branch, axe stroke by axe stroke, saw stroke by saw stroke, breaking this big corpse of a tree down and moving it to a place where it wasn't in the way. And it felt like a very different experience. David's confrontation with Goliath was a lot more dangerous and a lot different, but it was all ended at once. Whereas mine was less dangerous, less risky, and a lot more bit by bit sort of. The labor was a lot more of a bit by bit sort of thing. And I do feel like God was with me as I was doing that as well. And I feel like God was filling me with the Spirit as well. And I do feel like I received a little bit of a lesson here. in this comparison I was making, obviously David was a king, and David was chosen by God for incredible things, not the least of which was that he was one of the ancestors of Jesus, but also that I still saw some interesting comparisons. And anyways, the thing I came to was that it was a question. It was like, well, was David really just a one sling stone character? As I kept passing this sling stone on the ground, on this smooth stone on the ground, and the answer I came to as I was passing this sling stone for like the 100th time. Sorry, I just knocked over my water. I'm not graceful like David. The answer I came to after passing this sling stone for maybe the 30th, 40th, 50th time was, I was asking myself as I had made my 20th load moving Goliath, was how many sling stones did David sling before he slung that one stone at Goliath? He was a shepherd. He was a boy. I might be getting this wrong, but when Samuel, the prophet, came looking for the next king of Israel, and he came to Jesse's house, Jesse is David's dad, I might get the number wrong, so I'm not even going to guess, but David had a bunch of older brothers. David was the youngest. So when Samuel the prophet came to Jesse's house looking for the king, expecting that one of Jesse's sons was going to be the next king of Israel, he started at the oldest and worked his way down. And, at least I think like 8 to 10, I don't know. There's a fair amount of them. So anyways, there's the point I'm trying to make, is that David was alone out in the field with the sheep this whole time. So what you can gather from this is that David is out in the field alone with sheep a lot. And I was a kid, and I remember being a kid, and I had a little slingshot with rubber bands as a kid. And I know you can spend hours. If you got rocks and something to shoot, hopefully it's not windows. And I'm sorry for, being that guy when I was a little kid. But if you got something to shoot, you can spend a lot of time just passing the time. And the point I'm making is, I think David probably slung sling stones out of his sling a lot. Probably millions of times. In fact, he probably passed the 10,000. He could have very likely passed the 10,000 hour rule. They say to be an expert at something, you need to have clocked 10,000 hours doing the thing to be an expert at it. And that's how you know you'll be an expert. Now, actually, I'm guessing that because I don't know math very well, and maybe you have to be a certain age to have done that. I don't know how old David was when he killed Goliath. I don't know if anyone does, how many years. The Bible might say it exactly, and I just don't know. But the point is, David was a sling stone enthusiast, and I'm guessing he was quite good at it, and there's no evidence to support this besides the fact that he killed Goliath. Now, God did that, and we all know that, and David himself said so. But here's the big question. Is it relevant to us and to the story that David was good with a sling? Or is it only important to believe that any fool could have picked up that sling and said, God, I'm protecting your people and I'm doing your work and I'm proving that of your power, like please help this sling stone kill Goliath? And would it work? That's the question I came to eventually, was like, was there relevance to the past of David being proficient with a sling? And I think that the answer that I logically came to was yes. And we're entering into Isaac's opinion. Just so you know, we've largely been in Isaac's opinion and experience, where I've been touching on paraphrasing the Bible. So please know that I'm not like an expert on this stuff. And yet I want to go deeper into my opinion and my rationalizing here by talking about why I think that it's relevant that David was an expert with a sling and what that says for us in life. God had a great plan for David. God had planned it since before the first breath was ever taken, that David would be who David was. And part of that was that David would be a shepherd boy, and he would have a sling, and that he would be confident, not confident enough, not just in the Lord, but confident enough to deny any other weapon and just take his sling into battle. Go and fetch some stones and take his sling into battle. God made him that way, I think. So God also made him to be a shepherd boy who was left alone in the fields with sheep, with a responsibility to protect the sheep from wolves and maybe lions. And not just this responsibility, but also this boredom and this boyish and like man desire to do something. And I'm guessing when you're out in the field alone all day with your little lunchbox and your little water and just a bunch of sheep in the sky and God to pray to, you're probably going to just spend a lot of time throwing rocks. Okay, so we've already established this. So God made this circumstance, and God made it also that one day David could throw one stone, kill Goliath, save Israel from the Philistines, and become the king, and one day be the great, 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 whatever grandfather of Jesus. Okay, so I think that this is an important nugget to take away from this. God gives us great power. Some of the greatest moments of people's life in the history of the saints in the churches seem to be moments of almost like divine strength, divine wisdom, divine oratory skills, just something coming through them. And we can call this the Holy Spirit. And I think that that's what it is. And I think David exhibited this. I think people still exhibit this. I think depending on the person, depending on God's plan, it comes out in varying degrees of intensity or seeming significance. Take that for what you will. I think David killing Goliath has to be one of the high points in the history of the world, if not, at least the church, if not the world. David killing Goliath with that one stone. And yet David slinging stones his entire childhood probably had bearing on that. So again, we could explore this a million ways. Does God have the power to give a person who's never picked up a sling before, does God have the power to give that amateur the skill to kill Goliath? Yeah, God can do that. And he would if he wanted to. But it seems as though, to me, God picked a boy who was good with a sling to do that. I don't know exactly why. I don't exactly know why. But it does make you wonder how many times in prayer David was talking to God in the field. And God reminded little boy David, now David, and his father, maybe through the voice of his father or his older brothers, or maybe just in prayer, David heard the voice of the loving, protective father saying, now David, pick up your sling and get some stones. I want you to practice defending the sheep. Because if you don't protect them, no one will. You're out here to protect the sheep. That's what you're supposed to do. It's yes, you can dream, and yes, you can play on your harp, and yes, you can do this, but you must also be able to protect the sheep. How many times do you think that happened? And that's what made David go pick up the stone and unloop his belt from around his waist or around his wrist and decide to go throw stones for half the day. And one day, he was protecting the sheep of Israel against the lion of Goliath. And later, he was protecting the sheep of Israel from other, and this is where my Bible knowledge is not up to snuff, but I'm assuming that as king, he protected Israel from invaders. Israel was always being attacked, is always being attacked, and has always been attacked by outsiders and invaders. So his whole life story largely is to be the shepherd, slinging the stones of the Lord to protect the people of Israel. And I think in prayer, he probably was taught to do that as a cultivation of his virtue and a cultivation of his character, and to be prepared to do these things, and then thus to be more. I might be going a bit far to say that in that also becoming more suitable for heaven. So I'm not going to go into that. I don't know that, but I will say that I think that it's very pertinent to the story of David and Goliath that David was a slinger, and that he was a boy tasked with protecting the sheep his entire childhood, and that he had older brothers and his father telling him to do this, and that when David prayed to God, he probably was being told to do that by God also, simply because it was his responsibility to honor his father and to help his family. And so what does this tell us? And maybe we can go back to the tree that I was working on, my Goliath. I'm not going to make a big thing of that because it's frankly not that hard of work. And it's to compare it to killing Goliath is like kind of stupid. But it's hard and it's not super fun. And I enjoy the manual labor. And honestly, at times there's not much better I could be doing with my time than like serving the church and helping with a project like that. And I enjoy the labor, like I said, but there is always a little bit of laziness in me that is like, oh, I could probably be done, or like, oh, this, like maybe I won't go. And I'm not trying to talk myself up by any means because it's just a little side thing I'm doing, kind of for fun, kind of to help the church. But I think the lesson still is kind of blossoming in me, this idea that the little responsibilities like that God asks us to do are preparing us for greatness. Let's say David slung 1,000,000,000 stones in his childhood before he killed Goliath. 1,000,000,000 stones. That's a pretty bad ratio. Maybe he killed a few wolves and maybe he saved the sheep, but I would imagine he spent most of his time throwing rocks at rocks or stumps or tufts of grass or birds or rabbits, maybe a little reward of some meat or something. But a lot of the times he missed, and a lot of the times he was learning, and a lot of the times he was hitting a nothing. He was hitting a stump. He was hitting a rock, or a boulder. He was hitting something with like little consequence, except like, oh, I hit it that time. I'm like, oh, I should have gone a little more to the left, or a little higher, or a little harder. And as I'm picking this tree apart and pulling it and throwing it in this gorge, and I'm watching it slowly break down, I'm having my own moments of like, oh, like, don't grab it there, or you're going to get a thorn in your hand, or like, oh, like, I really probably should have sharpened my axe before coming here this time, or whatever it is like that. But I did learn this little lesson of like, God, and this is my opinion, but I think God blesses people with divine strength and power. And I think he prepares us for that the way that anyone prepares for anything. It's through work and practice. I think of Spurgeon. This guy was an amazing orator and writer, and he was just he had a brilliant tongue, and he gave it all to the Lord. And I think God fully gave him the Holy Spirit and like blessed him with that. But I think that if you look at how much that guy preached and what he lived his life like, you have to see that it was the countless stones of practice and discipline that he cast day and day and day that led to the truly great speeches and the truly great moments. And just like David, Spurgeon lives with us now today. And God works through Spurgeon's memory, I think, largely still today, just like David. Just like the story of David. I'm here talking about David right now. And David's long dead. So anyways, nothing huge, nothing really that transformative here in terms of like what we can look at the story of David by, but I do think it's worth acknowledging the next time that you're or I'm in a position where we're asking ourselves what the point is of the tedious task. And there's a little voice, maybe it's our boss at work, or maybe it's our father, or maybe even our wife, or maybe our pastor, or maybe just your conscience, or maybe it's God in prayer. If you believe that you hear the voice of God in that context. I know that can be a touchy subject for people, but whatever the case, if you hear someone telling you to do something that seems pointless, mundane, repetitive, not very glorious, remember that if it seems like the responsible, right thing to do, and it seems like it follows the virtue of what you've been taught, and it seems as though like the intention behind it is good, like preparing to save the sheep from the wolves, or defending the Israelites, or that's anyways. At a certain point, you may find yourself well prepared to deal with something extraordinary, and you might also, if you deny that voice time and time again, 1,000,000,000 times, you deny that voice. One day, you might find yourself standing in front of Goliath, and you may look to God and be like, God, I need your help to throw this stone. And I don't know if he'll give it to you or not. I don't know if he has the power to, for sure. But I think what we love about David in that story is that he was confident. And he was confident because he was a God-fearing, God-loving boy who loved God and worshiped God. But I also think that he was probably confident because he knew what it felt like to have a sling spinning around in his hand. And if you've heard anything about combat, and if you've heard anything about fighting and martial arts, which I have only mostly heard about these things, the general consensus is you were going to perform a lot worse in dire and extreme circumstances than you would in training, even though you are naturally assuming that you would do better because you really need to. And that training is what takes over and helps you win when shit hits the fan, essentially. And that's why we train in the military, and that's why the guy who wins the boxing match is oftentimes the one who trained more and smarter. And God supersedes our human laws, certainly, but also the church is pretty clear that discipline and practice and ritual and consistency are important in various walks and aspects of life. And they build the spirit, and they nourish and build the spirit. And as I think it was Paul who said something along the lines of spiritual growth is more important than training the body, something because the body can benefit you now, a strong body can benefit you now, but developing and fostering the growth of the spirit benefits you now and brings you to heaven. Again, paraphrasing the Bible, got to be careful about doing that, but I think the main point stands the same, that I think, yes, David received God's divine power in that moment and killed Goliath, but I think God chose to do that and chose David's plan for that leading up to that moment to be a boy who's proficient with a sling is an important thing to remember here. And if we do have free will, and however that's played out, ask yourself if God has a part of your plan being a monotonous routine of training and work of some kind to lead you to one extraordinary moment. And obviously it's not likely to be like becoming the king of Israel. But it could still be one of the best moments of your life, one of the best services of your life to people. I mean, the course of history would have been drastically changed, and the course of the church would have been drastically changed if the Philistines had just wiped out Israel in that day. Obviously, Israel survived such things at times, but still. Anyways, something to think about. I like how manual labor for the church, which is supposed to be an act of worship, has in fact opened my mind and heart to new ideas about the Bible and new things, and hopefully nothing wrong, just to me inspirational and sometimes helpful. And I will say this, I hope these videos are good for you all, and I hope you enjoy watching this. But as I'm editing, I don't edit these much. I don't take stuff out of the middle. I just add stuff to the beginning and go through and make sure the end is good, and make sure I didn't do anything really offensive in the middle. As I get going, I might say something really offensive, and I haven't had to deal with that yet. But anyways, the point is, as I'm rewatching these videos so far, I'm hearing myself say these things and seeing the wisdom and realizing that it's largely not my wisdom. It's largely wisdom that I've read from the Bible, or that has been kind of passed down to me from my elders, or maybe something that has been kind of imbibed in me inspirationally, if I use grammar correctly there, but something that I've kind of received, and yet I'll sit there feeling kind of this heat of guilt as I'm about to press publish and be like, I'm not doing this as good as I should be doing. So I want you to know that this is partially a growing experience for me, because after I posted that Thorns video and realized the final sentiment of the Thorns video was that maybe it's important for us to go out there and deal with the thorns so that other people have to. And as I'm posting this, I'm realizing well, that means you too, you little son of a bitch. Get out there and do stuff. So, and here, this is part of that for me, but also there's other things that I could be doing better too. So if you're wondering why I'm making these videos and what's happening here, hopefully you're getting something like that, or you're just enjoying me talking. Hopefully some of you that haven't gone to church will go to church, or haven't opened a Bible or bought a Bible will do so. Hopefully some of you will just pray. Whatever. If you don't, know that I'm learning here and I'm growing, and this is benefiting me, and this is a humbling experience for me. Anyways, I love you for watching this. I love you for being here. Thank you so much. And read the Bible. No, check it out. There's some cool stories in there. The story of David is just such an epic story of battle. I mean, this little boy defeating a giant with one rock. There's an entire army of people, of fully adult men, standing behind David who are afraid of Goliath. And David just walks out there and is like, I've got God with me. And he picks up a rock and he puts it in a shoelace and a strip of leather and he kills a giant. That's a cool story. You gotta appreciate something about that. Anyways, love you guys. Bye.